I'm happy to see that there are people who are attending for the third time, and I believe are the majority. And as been mentioned by Jennifer, this is a training that covers the East African region. We see which extend beyond East Africa. The other day I was looking at the attendance, and we are seeing people from Ghana, from West Africa, from South America, as far as from South Africa. So it's really goes beyond the East Africa region, which we are happy that this training has generated interest for people to join. And for those who have been consistent and those who have been there in the first and second training, welcome. And we hope that you are gaining very deep insight on how to manage your finances. Basically, the objective of this financial management training for CSOs is to strengthen the management of finances in CSOs, and by extension to make sure that the CSOs are well managed in terms of financial management and other areas that we'll be tackling. And also just to make sure that the organizations are less risk and are attractive to any funder who would want to interact with them, because they have systems and structures that work for them, their financial systems and structures are working for them. So KCDF is a non-profit organization. Our main work is capacity building in terms of working with our different community partners to capacity build them, strengthen their capacities to manage their own affairs, their own programs. And also, we also do grant making. And in grant making, we both do grant matching, and we also offer grants for different development needs by the communities. Otherwise, we are looking forward to a very interactive session. And we're also hoping that by the end of this 3 days training, organizations or CSOs will really improve their financial management in the organization to ensure that we are compliant, and also we have healthy financial management practices. Otherwise, welcome to the meeting, and looking forward to a very interactive meeting.
Now, to just let us know who will be taking us through the training for today, allow me to introduce the trainer, Colin Muga, who is from Uganda. Colin is a financial management expert with over 5 years of experience helping SMEs become investment-ready and secure funding. He has partnered with organizations like World Food Program, USAID, UNICEF, UNFPA to drive meaningful change in underserved communities across Uganda. Specializing in developing tailored financial management training manuals, Colin has conducted impactful sessions on record keeping, management account formulation, and strategic financial planning. His efforts have strengthened the financial sustainability and operational efficiency of organizations, contributing to their sustainability and empowering communities to build resilient futures. So at least once we share the contacts for Colin, you can be able to reach out to him, because he'll be able to assist you as a CSO. Lastly, with a steadfast commitment to creating lasting impact, Colin continues to equip organizations and communities with practical tools and strategies for sustainable growth. Allow me to take this opportunity to give this session to Colin, who will be able to run through the learnings for us and take us to the last and final training for financial management.
So today's session will be looking at financial reporting, compliance, and risk management. So here we're going to just try to understand, as a business who have gone through all the processes from understanding financial management to now actually doing the financial planning and budgeting, coming up with budgets, instilling these record-keeping practices into our organization. So after all this is done, we actually need to be in position to actually come up with a financial report for the different stakeholders. So in this session, we'll be looking at financial reporting. Why is that key? What's the importance of that? And what are the elements of really financial reports? How do we try to present these financial reports to our different stakeholders? Because if you realize most of these reports that you're generating them, they're going to be numerical. So a lot of numbers in place. But you have to understand that now when you're presenting this information to an external party, especially if you're coming from the finance team, if you're sharing this information to an external party, it must try to be information that anyone that does not have that high of a finance background can be able to understand the financial report that you've generated. So just trying to understand how they perform that period of year. And then, yeah, we'll go through grant management. So I know that most of you here are NGOs, CSOs, and I know we have a number of the organizations here could be already implementing the grants, or some are getting grants that they are going to implement. So we're going to try and look at what are the different types of grants. So for those who are just looking into the process of going into trying to apply for these grant opportunities to try and create that impact, what types of grants are out there for you, and how can they really support your organization? And if we now are in position to get these grants, or if we're already implementing them, how are we going to do that effectively to ensure that we meet all our targets, and also ensure that we're creating impact, as well as ensuring that the donor agencies are also happy with the work that we are doing as an organization. So after that, we shall go into compliance, usually as NGOs or as CSOs, or any other organization that is starting up. We always have to look at the compliance element. I know most of the times as these organizations will always start at a point whereby our compliance is really low, but that's understandable because some steps need to be taken one step at a time. But we also need to understand that if we have just started today, in terms of compliance, where are we looking to go tomorrow or in the foreseeable future? What does our organization have to look like so as they don't raise any risks in that department? So one of them will look at the legal obligations of NGOs, especially in the Kenyan space, and we'll look at we'll finalize a session with an assessment of the risks that could face our organizations and possible mitigation strategies that we could try to come up with to combat these risks. So that's what today's session is going to look like. Yeah, we'll look at what financial reporting is, and basically from what they have shared, it's not any different. So basically financial reporting, just to try and break it down at a high level, is just trying to document and communicate financial activities and performance over specific periods of time, typically on a quarterly or yearly basis. So usually as an organization should also look at having different reporting timelines. So usually some organizations look at doing this on a quarterly basis, and some try to look at doing it at a yearly basis. The advantage with doing it as a quarterly basis, which is more frequent than a yearly basis, is it supports an organization to try and just look at get those checks of where the organization is going quite earlier, compared to you waiting for a year to end. So usually, as the different members in the finance team are trying to account for the different resources that are coming in, if you're doing this on the reporting on a quarterly basis, then by the time you do this, you are in position to understand if you're having any variances, or if there are a number of variances that are coming in, and if they are there, what's maybe the basis of that, and how can you course correct that. You can also always do it on a yearly basis, and this is usually done for maybe organizations that don't have many transactions, or for those that really are at the mature stages and there are really a number of transactions that they go through. So they find it wise to just do this at the end of a year, have maybe say an internal audit and also the external audit, just to give them a sense check of where they are at the end of the year. So companies usually use financial reports to organize accounting data and report on current financial status. So you remember how you come up with these financial reports is just basically through the different transactions that you have recorded during that period of time, that financial period of time that you're looking at doing this report for. So if you've had a number of income coming in, you're going to try to record those transactions. If you've had a number of expenditure that you're doing, or maybe assets that you are acquiring, then during this point in time, you try to organize that data, and it will give you a status of where your organization is financially, to show you, are you in the red, or are you in the green, or are you just trying to break even in all your transactions? So financial reports are usually essential in the projections of future profitability, industry position, and growth, and many financial reports are available for public review. So I think even when we were ending the previous session, there's someone who asked whether, as you're coming up with these budgets, and also when you do like financial audits, should they be public, and is there a risk in that? And I think I shared that there's never a risk, but usually people who share their reports or their audited accounts will always be public companies that have to show accountability to their various shareholders. So as you know, as currently as the financial space is today, a number of external people can be in position to hold shares in these different public companies, and it's always when they always publish these reports, is just trying to show accountability to the different shareholders that may need to see this accountability to show why maybe those dividends were paid to them, or why they weren't paid, what's the company looking at doing. So also as an NGO, should try to aspire to this, because as an NGO, you're going to have a number of stakeholders that you're working with that are going to be external. This could be investors, this could be donors, and they're always going to want to look at these financial reports just to know whether your organization is sustainable, and whether it's something that they would be interested in based off your finances. The final one is financial reporting and monitoring are required for all NGOs receiving donor funds to monitor their financial affairs. So of course, as you always try to look out for these funding opportunities, you should also have it in mind that they're going to ask you for different reporting metrics. So they're going to ask you for a number of reports based off on the utilization of the funds that have been availed to you. And I believe if we're able to grasp this session right, this should not be a challenge, and you should be able to implement, provide this accountability. And once you've provided this accountability, it also gives a number of NGOs the motivation to go forward with your organization. So yeah, this is something that we'll be just going through today, and also the grant management topic. So we'll just continue forward. And here we're just trying to understand who needs financial reports. And as an organization, we always have different people who are supporting this organization in the day-to-day operations, as well as also have a number of stakeholders that we are accountable to, or a number of partners that we are trying to walk this journey with. So here we try to come up with a number of those people that will need financial reports, and also the reason to why they need financial reports. So the board of trustees, this is actually one area that a number of NGOs, organizations have to try and implement. So it's always advisable to have a board in your organization, just for those to just enhance the independent decision-making process. So a number of times I interface with organizations whereby the CEO, the managing director, is also the chairman of the board, and that's not always right, because there's always bias to it. So always as someone who is running an organization, an NGO, or someone who founded this organization, you should try to remain independent from the board. So you should just appoint people there that have experience in maybe the sector that you are in, or mainly the sector that you are in, and can give you that advice to support push your NGO's operations upwards and scale it up. So usually this board of trustees will always need financial reports to keep an eye on how your resources are being used to achieve the NGO's objectives. So you realize that now, if you as a managing director or founder of this organization on the board, there's going to be that bias because you'll be the one who implemented this and spent the resources in a certain way, and you want to create a bias to the other people on this board. So if you're independent on this, they can be able to give you a good opinion on how your resources are being utilized, and they can also be able to guide on some of the things that you will have to implement in your organization just to check these areas. So the other is project staff. And here project staff is mainly for the projects that you're implementing. This could be the part-time staff. This could be the full-time staff. And here it just supports them to know how much money and resources are available for their projects and what has been spent so far. So if you recall rightly, when we were in the previous session, when we were looking at the component of budgeting, we came up with different activities that we looked at. And we were saying that most of those activities there should be, let me say, a department that takes up those activities, or there will always be a manager or a budget holder for those items. And those are usually part of the project staff. And if they now have these financial reports, they'll be in position to now know, okay, we are given this under this budget. This is how much we utilized, and this is how much was left for, let me say, the period going forward. And it will help them course correct on whether there were variances or whether they were in position to actually meet their targets. So the other stakeholder is a donor, and these are usually the people who provide the funding opportunities. And for them, they just want to make sure that grants are being utilized and fulfilled as to what was really set out to support the organization. And also, these reports also enable them to know that, okay, we're giving this organization the grants, they are implementing them well. Maybe it's an organization we can continuously collaborate with in the future, because it's always difficult to come up to organizations that are really credible. There's always a lot of frustration there. So these reports also just help them on that. The next is managers. And these are the managers of the projects, just to understand how project funds are being utilized based off the original plans that were set out. We'll have the finance staff, and this finance staff will entail people like accountants, maybe the procurement people in there who are always able to onboard different service providers that you need as you're trying to run your whole project. So this finance team just wants to ensure that there's enough money in the bank to be in position to meet the different payable days, as well as the different receivable days, as well as the receivables of the different organizations that you're partnering with. Then there are project beneficiaries, and here is just to know what it costs to provide the services they're benefiting from, and to decide if this is good value for their community. So usually as you're going into these communities, you will always first face some kickback on those different things. So yeah, it will really help the project beneficiaries just to ensure they are in position to have that buy-in, and also to the general public to know what the NGO raises and spends during the year and what the money is used for. And then to the government to make sure that the NGO pays any taxes due and does not abuse its status as a not-for-profit organization, because you realize there are some people that are not meeting that criteria. So yeah, it's just basically that. And yeah, we'll go into the next topic.
Colin, you're on mute. Colin, can you hear me? You're on mute.
I think my connection had dropped for a minute. So
And
yeah,
also
here
just to let you know, we have
can you hear me?
5 more minutes. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. So this section, we're just trying to look at the elements of good financial reports. So as you're coming up with this financial report, what should it try to look like? So it should have detailed income and costs. So it should be detailed on the income that's coming in and the costs that your business is going to incur. It should roll up to show spending and income by major budget line item. So as you're trying to spend, as you've come up with the budget, there are going to be areas that you try to ensure that are in place. So you would have to know, are these incomes or the expenses that are meeting, are they relative to the income that are coming in? And that also helps to show the variances between spent costs and budgeted costs. So if the plan was to have an expenditure of 1 million Kenyan shillings, how are we doing on that? Have we spent less or have we spent more in trying to meet the project? It will also try to inform you of your organization's financial health, because at this point in time, you're really trying to see if your revenues are actually matching your costs. Do you have some money that could support you implement another project left over, and should be used internally and externally for program management and stakeholder accountability. So as you're coming up with financial reports, you always have to look at your internal staff as well as the external parties. How are these reports reflecting to both these people? Is it something that as an organization you're proud of, or is it something that you would actually want to hide from these different parties? So just to try and align to that and just have that accountability component. These reports are usually generated for both the internal and external parties, and we should desist from this practice of trying to have internal reports that are different from the reports which are external. We should have one report that's shared to all the different stakeholders, just to have that transparency component that we have tried to talk about through this whole financial management training. So as you're presenting financial reports, there are also a number of things you have to take into accountability, because now after you've prepared them, there's going to reach the point of presenting these to actually the different stakeholders. So usually these reports should be clear, brief, and easy to read. So as I earlier mentioned, as we're coming up with these reports, you realize they won't be they would have many numbers to them. But that's when you now try to play with things like graphs, maybe pie charts here, just to try and create that visual component to the external parties that are not that knowledgeable in the financial component. And an exception report should assume the following layout. So it should have an overview of the period being reported. So it should have an overview of the financial year, and should talk about how these figures have been compiled, what process was taken into consideration, and what activities are covered by attached reports, and who is the author of this report. It should also try to look into significant variances. So you should be able to highlight the most significant variances from your budget, and also just try to explain the reasons behind these variances. So for example, if you've overspent on an item that you thought you wouldn't, then you have to go back to the drawing board and understand, did we ever spend on this item because we budgeted less for it? Did the market price just go up, or what really happened? Or is it something that we didn't anticipate at all? And then there should be recommendations for action. Usually, as we come up with these financial reports, we're trying to understand what's the current financial, current financial space of this organization, and how can we do it better? What steps should be recommended for us to address our financial gap currently? So if we had a number of variances, what are the recommendations? Do we have to now change our process of trying to get these different pricings as we go forward? What do we try to do in that area? So that's all we had about financial reporting. And under this next session, we're just going to try and look at, discuss about this. You could raise your hand. You could also just share in the chat. Why is transparency in financial reporting important when communicating with donors? So for those who have been here for all the 3 trainings, you'll realize transparency is something that we have really tried to hit on for all these training sessions. So we're just trying to see, why is it important in financial reporting when you're trying to communicate with different donors? So I'll just give a minute for a few comments to be shared, and then we'll proceed into the next session.
Hi, Colin. So as we wait maybe for some participants to raise their hands, because I feel this is a very important actually topic, I see one comment in the chat by Charles that it creates a donor's confidence. Any other ideas you can paste in the chat, or you can probably raise your hand. 1 of 2 people can discuss with Colin and the other participants. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, you can advise on the time. How long are we giving to get more answers?
So Colin, you have 3 more minutes for this session.
Okay. Okay, if we don't have any more comments, I can just maybe share on that. So yeah, usually transparency is key when.
So allow me to disrupt you, Colin. We are receiving some comments on the chat, so I think Valeria will be able to read them. Valeria, too.
Okay.
Sure. Faith is saying encourages continuous support. Calvin, it creates trust and confidence among the 2 parties. Andrea encourages long-term support. When donors see the tangible results of their contributions, they're more likely to continue to support your cause. Transparency fosters a sense of partnership and ongoing commitment. Very good thoughts shared here. Hilda is saying builds trust and credibility. Donors want assurance that their contributions are being used effectively. Clear, honest financial reporting fosters confidence in your organization. Then we still have some comments from Bernadette, who is saying transparency is important to enhance trust, credibility, and accountability, and also strengthens partnerships. Kevin is mentioning it gives them assurance of value for their money. Agnes reduces risk of conflict and builds trust. Nzembi, it helps show value for money and account for any variances. Claire stamps out fear and uncertainty. And then I think this is a question which we will take in a minute in the Q&A. Francis is saying transparency is a foundation for good donor relationship. It will ensure continued funding and engagement, promotes integrity. And last but not least, we have Brenda who is saying it shows money is being used for intended purposes. So I'll give it back to you, Colin, to give you a minute to comment as we can proceed for time. And thank you for everyone who's continuing to answer this question in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Valeria, for the session. Those were very insightful comments from the participants. So thank you for all who have been in position to share. I'm really happy with the submissions because I think just to try and group everything that we have been able to share about is, I think it's one word I always like to group it into, which is sustainability. So if you realize from all your submissions that you have shared, they just point towards sustainability, because usually I've interacted with people who are starting up organizations and they rarely look at the sustainability component. So most of the way they implement different projects or different activities, you'll find the sustainability component is lacking. But if you realize now, when you come up with all these financial reports and you communicate and they're really transparent to the donors, you're going to realize that it all points to sustainability, because if these donors are now happy with the reports and how your organization is implementing the funds provided, then they're going to continuously try to support your cause. So as an organization, we're going to be sustainable, because if we implement this project, one challenge I always find with a number of organizations is they rarely think about the long term. And that's always quite a challenge. They're always thinking of what do these current days look like, but I don't look at what do they want the organization to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's how you usually find a number of organizations and misusing these funds. I've interacted to those that you provide, a donor agency has provided funds with them, and the agency gets frustrated in getting financial reports and accountabilities on how this was implemented. And you realize going forward, they won't be in position to maybe support your cause anymore. I've interacted with people with very good business models, and they're just not utilizing these donor opportunities. They're having these organizations as a front to just get a number of funding, which is then not utilized efficiently. And you realize that that sort of burns bridges. So to realize that we're just trying to look at how do we make these organizations of ours sustainable for the foreseeable future, to ensure that the causes that we are really supporting, we're actually doing them with transparency. So I had Valeria had a question, so maybe can go into a brief Q&A, because I think she wanted to share on some things. She said there's a question in the chat, so I'll just pause there for now. Thank you for everyone who has shared their comments, and yeah, just keep sharing in the chat, and we're going to keep having continuous sessions where we'll try to go through those questions and comments.
Thank you, Colin. Yes, we already have 2 questions in the chat. As we go through this, I just encourage the other participants to start typing as we're addressing these ones. And just a reminder that if you wish, we would love to hear your voice. If you want to directly ask a question, you can also raise your hand and you will be unmuted. So the first question is from Rosalind. She's asking, in the event your organization hasn't received any funding yet, do you still need to write financial reports, or is financial record keeping sufficient?
So just to answer that question, I believe if you are an early stage NGO organization, that means at the current moment, maybe you're using your personal finances, or maybe you are able to source some funding from maybe different parties, could be angel investors that could have been your family or a number of those. So yeah, you still need to also reach the process of financial reporting, because you realize you'll be trying to also be accountable to maybe you yourself as a person, maybe if you're utilizing your personal finances, if you have any angel investors that could be your family members, your relatives that have also supported to ensure that you start up this organization. Those reports could be key to them, just to show that just to give them that confidence of what you are doing. Of course, usually our family members rarely, they'll probably provide you with some funding opportunity, but they'll rarely ask you on the progress. But it's just something that you could start doing just to try and learn the process. So as when you reach the point of now trying to also pitch to these different investors or donors, you already have reports on the funds that you've been implementing. Since they've been personal funds, they will show that you actually invested in this cause and you've already invested so much of your money to this. And if they give you more funding, this is why you're trying to go. So of course it will help you for that accountability as for now, but also during your different conversations, different donors that maybe you would have identified or are interested in your whole organization. This is something that they will ask you at that point, and you do not want to reach that point where you've gotten someone who is interested on board, and then you have to now work backwards. So yeah, I'll just share that for that question.
Thank you, Colin. We have two more questions. One is from Ronald. How do you integrate financial reporting with audit reports for any organization considering review?
So basically, to answer that, usually as you're trying to, because if you realize the way they do audited accounts is quite different. So audited accounts will be focused on your financial performance, so mainly the figures, and you realize audited accounts rarely give variance, and they don't really focus on maybe the goals that you set up as an organization at the very inception of the financial year and where you are at now. So audited accounts, of course, you can use them in the course of financial reporting, because those numerical figures will now support you in making your financial report when you're in the section of talking about the different variances. So if your revenue is higher than what you anticipated, then that's something that your audited accounts will support you on. So you use audited accounts as a section of your financial reports as you're trying to talk about the different variances. And yeah, basically that. So it's just utilizing the audited accounts for your financial report. They will give you some of the numerical figures that you utilize for when you're doing the financial report. Valeria, I think we'll just have the final one.
Yes, there's a last question from Charles. He requires clarifications about financial report and management report.
Can you just ask the question again?
Collins, he is asking clarifications about financial report and management report. If the question is unclear, we can ask Charles to elaborate.
Yeah, I think I'm not clearly getting it, but maybe from what I understand is probably trying to have a variance between what a management report would look like, because I believe a management report will now cover much more. It will have much more depth to it compared to a financial report. A financial report, you're just looking at what the finances of your organization are looking like. So for the management report, that's now going to focus on so many areas of the organization. It could also try to now look into What are the growth plans of your organization? What are those looking like for the foreseeable future? What gaps are you seeing in the market? What are your strengths that you think can maybe help you penetrate through the market? So first, it's going to be more detailed on the overall look of the organization, while for the financial report, we're going to now we're just focusing on what the financial figures and the transactions look like of your organization. So I believe a financial report can be a section under your management report if you're trying to do an overall audit of what your organization looks like, because I think a management report you would even look at now trying to analyze the people that you have in your organization. Are they competent for your mission? You will try to look at what your strategic plans look like and all that. So yeah, that's what I would think of it from the question that was submitted.
Thanks, Colin. I think we're good to move now to the next session. If participants have still questions, we will take them in the final Q&A of the webinar. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, here we're going to just go into the grant management topic. And yeah, grant management is something that's, I know, really key for the people that are on here. So probably there could be people that are struggling on how to manage these grants, the process that they should follow. Maybe there are those that are just trying to access grants for the first time. So we thought that it's really key to try and understand this. Also, from my experience in the Ugandan space, a number of people are really suffering with grant management, especially when it comes to donors. And you realize now a number of donor funding opportunities have become hectic. There are very hectic processes to that. And that has come up because of the grant management pain point. So just for them to try and fix that, they're trying to now innovate different ways of ensuring that organizations are able to manage the grants provided effectively and efficiently. So we'll start by looking at what is grant management. So grant management is basically the process of securing, tracking, and reporting grant funding awarded to a non-profit by a funding corporation. So this funding corporation could be a government agency, it could be a private or a public foundation or a corporation. So you've heard of, so in part of the private, there are always a number of individuals that always try to do CSR, and they come up with these organizations that try to do this non-profit work. Popular one I can talk about is Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is actually supporting in the African continent. So that's kind of like a private corporation, which based off the interests of the two founders, they really founded to try and support those different areas. So of course, these private people are the ones who come up with this corporation, and then maybe they go to and solicit different funding opportunities from a number of individuals that could be looking at a number of people that are interested in their cause. So if they're going to look at maybe trying to support on the challenge of malaria, and then they will just go and pitch this to different investors who come on board in their different foundations. So also another private foundation I could think of is, let me say, MasterCard Foundation. We all know MasterCard is actually a private company, but it came up with kind of a foundation whereby they try to support different causes in the African continent, or also globally in different continents. But here I'll just look at in Africa. And yeah, MasterCard is really trying to do a lot with different partners as well. So they're always coming up with these grant opportunities just to try and support our countries or our economies or the youth in our economies to develop. So usually, of course, as they provide these opportunities, they are going to ask you, they are going to really want to ensure that there's management of their funds. And currently, they're also trying to instill some checks to ensure that the funds being provided are also used for the causes that they have actually put out. So we'll go into looking, its purpose is to guarantee that these funds are spent appropriately and in conformity with grant makers' requirements for the award of grants. So if I've given you, if as MasterCard they've provided you with a grant opportunity and they want you to really try and impact, let me say, smallholder farmers to try and ensure that they're in position to better their livelihoods or improve their livelihoods and also sustain them, they're going to really want to see that the funds that you're spending, they are really targeted to this. So usually they also come and do routine checks with different organizations. They will do different site visits in these communities and try to understand the impact that you're trying to do there. And that's all part of the grant management process. It involves so many things. So fund and support community projects in NGOs whose mission and planned activities align with their values and vision for future change. It's necessary to prove to the donor that they have made a wise investment in selecting your organization to get their grant through proper management of funds. So you realize usually as they come to provide these funding opportunities, they are going to really first do a due diligence on your whole organization to make sure that it meets their values and the vision that they have for future change. So, for example, let me say if an organization is now trying to push, if a donor agency is really trying, seen a pain point of, let me say, digitization of different smallholder farmers and all that, they will really come and do due diligence on your organization to ensure that you're actually able to support in the digitization of these enterprises that they're trying to sustain. Because, of course, in the world where it's going today, digitization is very crucial right now, because we have realized something that is trying to automate a number of processes for organizations. And if you have your things digitized, then there are many risks that you prevent in that regard. So if you're really trying to digitize different individuals, does that really align to the values and mission of the agency that you're approaching? This is just to also try to avoid you applying for grant opportunities that maybe do not fit your values and vision just to get the funding and implement. Should always also try to be targeted as an organization on where you want to go. And also usually when they do their due diligence checks, it's also going to be something that will come out and they'll say, okay, this organization, I don't think it fits our values or mission, or it actually fits them. So we came up with a number of questions one should ask as an organization before you apply for funding. And one of that is, as an organization, do you have a clear funding objective? So as well, looking at this, as you are starting up your organization, or as your organization, you're trying to make it sustainable, you have to understand what's your clear funding objective. If you get this, if you're trying to get this money from different donor agencies, what's the objective of this funding? Is it something whereby as an organization, you're implementing all grants without a targeted objective? Because as an organization, you could maybe say, my organization is targeted to supporting women entrepreneurs or women smallholder farmers because maybe they're facing so many challenges. So that can be something that's a clear funding objective. And yeah, you could look at people who can be able to come on board and also support you in that, in achieving your objective. So then you look at, do I know the revenue projections? So as you're going to pitch to these donors, to these investors, to invest in your organization, what are your revenue projections looking like? Are they realistic that I'm going to be able to get this funding? And then these are the various ways I'm going to try to implement it. So that has to really come out for it to be realistic, and also to give that confidence to the people that you are pitching to, than you coming up with revenue objectives that everyone can look at and say, no, your organization, there's no way this can be done. And then they start doubting the overall credibility of the organization. So you have to know your revenue projections and how you also plan to spend this money to ensure that, yeah, it's something that's really sustainable. The third is how many volunteers do we have on staff? So how many people are ready to volunteer on the project? How many maybe will we have to pay for in terms to get the expertise to implement the project that we're being provided to do? And the final one is, will this funding help us succeed in our missions? So it's always advisable to get funding, because usually this funding, as the different agencies provide it to you, it's going to come with different terms and conditions. So you need to be able to assess those and try to see whether this funding actually will help you succeed in your missions. At times you may look at it and say, oh, this funding that I'm getting, it's maybe too limited to actually create an impact in what I'm trying to do. And this is something you can always share with them. They see how it can maybe be adjusted, or for you to look for other avenues. So yeah, that's what what grant management looks like, and mainly what it tries to target. And on this next slide, we're just trying to understand what the principles of grant management are. So there are a number of principles that one should follow as they're trying to really utilize these grants and effectively and efficiently. So the first is accountability and transparency with respect to utilization of grant funds. We already went through this under the previous session, so it's something that's key. I won't really shed a lot of light on that, because from your submissions, I believe you are able to understand that concept. The second is efficient and effective use of the grant funds. So as you are having this overall implementation, you have to ensure you're doing this efficiently and effectively. So you have to ensure that the funds are going to what you actually set out to do. I remember when we had the overall budget and the plan, we talked about things of having your activity plans, how much you have to spend on that. So you have to ensure that during this grant management thing, those things come out properly, whereby you're ensuring that the money you have provided to a certain activity, you're actually meeting that and not really going over that. If you always notice a number of challenges in staying within the budget line or the activity plan, then it's always a conversation you can always have with these donors. They are always willing to listen. So you can always share with them the challenges that you're finding, maybe meeting this budget, working within this budget line, and they can always see how they can support you. Maybe they can say, maybe we can move finances from this to this. Yeah, so you just have to be in constant communication with them. There's compliance with terms and conditions of grant management. So usually, as you're interfacing with different people, they're always going to have terms and conditions of how they want to implement these grants. And if they have these terms and conditions, basically, you have to comply with them. So we don't want to reach a point whereby we're not really complying with these things, and then it's just raising red flags about our organization and also its future sustainability. As we're also doing grant management, we have to ensure that we have robust financial management systems with robust internal controls, budget controls, and fund management. So internal controls here, we're just trying to come up with preventative measures to ensure that as we are implementing these grants, we're preventing certain risks of theft, risks of fraud, and so many others. So we have to ensure that we're coming up with these robust internal control systems. We have to ensure we have these financial management systems, so good recording procedures in place, because this will now support us as we are doing the reporting on how the funding has been utilized. And we have to ensure timely submission of all reports as required under the grant. So usually a number of donors, when they give you this, they will say, okay, maybe we will require a progress report every month on the 25th of the month. Others could say maybe it should be quarterly, every 25th of the end of the quarter. So you have to ensure that you're able to adhere with all these timely submissions, just to prevent a point of them having to chase after you. You would rather submit a report that shows the challenges that you are facing trying to implement than you going quiet on the whole implementation. So as we do this, we just have to ensure that we have, we're trying to be sustainable in our businesses, and there's constant communication between the organization and also the donor agency. So we'll go into now the next slide, which looks at steps of grant management. So as we're trying to do grant management as an organization, there are a number of steps that we try to follow. So the first is funding opportunities. So under the first step, what we're really trying to target looking at is basically identifying the different funding opportunities that are out there. Of course, there are a number of calls that keep coming in as the year continues or as the year goes on. And as you are assessing these different funding opportunities, you have to also look at how these support in your overall mission and also the vision of your organization. So we're trying to prevent the point of us actually having to take up funding opportunities just for the sake of looking for income to support our cause, but just to see whether the different funding opportunities out there fit our purpose, and then you try to identify those that you would want to go with or different partners that you would want to go with. One mistake that some of us make is trying to think that it's only that donor agency that has to really try to assess whether we need these opportunities, but you yourself
Colin,
as an... Yes.
allow me to disrupt you a bit to just let you know on time. We have 10 minutes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So yeah, just under funding opportunities, usually as you are also highlighting the number of funding opportunities that are out there, you also have to think about if you also want to work with this donor agency. Are they the right fit for you? Do they support you will they support you going forward? There are a number of organizations I've interacted with, and you will realize the number of donor agencies out there that actually them as an organization prefer not to work with because of maybe because what they're trying to do really varies from what maybe the donor agency is trying to do. So they also try to assess that on their end, rather than you just looking at applying for this opportunity and then hoping that the donor is the one that gives you the direction where to go. You should also have a sense of direction on where you want to go. So after we've highlighted these funding opportunities, we go into the step of grant and proposal writing. So they will always ask for a proposal. They will ask for different documents. They will ask for how you plan on implementing these finances. Now, of course, your proposal should also show how much you actually need, where is this money going to go to. So it should be detailed, and it should really show the impact that it's going to try to bring into your organization or the community that you're trying to implement this. So once this is done, of course, they have some steps where they will try to assess your ability to actually implement what you have shared. And if you're successful, now they are able to onboard you onto their funding opportunity, and then that's when you start the implementation. And under that implementation, they will always also try to support you to ensure that actually you meet the targets that they set out as they were trying to maybe onboard you. So usually a number of these organizations will even have a number of co-creations with you while they try to understand whether actually the numbers they're trying to, that they've provided you with and the targets are things that are actually realistic. And after we've done that, we go into compliance monitoring. So under compliance monitoring, we're basically trying to look at how are we complying with the different regulations and the terms and conditions that were set out for this opportunity. For example, if this grant funding was set out to support only women, are we actually only supporting women, or we have now diverted our overall plan and now we're supporting maybe male smallholder farmers? So that's where compliance monitoring comes in, where they'll have those checks with you, certain due diligence visits or site visits in the different communities that you are really working in. And then the final step is always the programmatic and financial reporting. So this goes back into our previous topic, whereby now here you're trying to present the financial report on the funding opportunity that came in. If it was $100,000, have you implemented all this based off the targets that you actually set out to achieve? Have you matched the targets? Are there any variances? Why? What are the recommendations for action? And how can the donor maybe try to support you better going forward? So that's how the grant management process tries to look like. And now in this slide, we're trying to now go into what the types of grants look like. So this is just to give you a picture as you're going out there to now try and apply for these different grant opportunities. You need to know what kinds of grants are out there, what types of grants are out there, and which one would you as an organization prefer. So the first is unrestricted grants, and usually unrestricted grants are grants whereby someone provides you money and you can really use it for anything that helps your organization really achieve its mission. Of course, it will be under a specific objective of, let me say, we're trying to support maybe smallholder farmers in this community, but they give you the flexibility of playing around with the funds in case maybe you've under budgeted for a number of activities. So they give you the flexibility of moving it. So for example, you could have over budgeted for salaries, and then you realize that there is maybe facilitation that you under budgeted for as you're trying to do these different capacity building sessions. So they will allow you that flexibility of moving some money from, let me say, the salary activity line to now facilitating these capacity building sessions. So if you're going into the community, if you're going to need different materials, that can always be moved there. So that's how unrestricted fund grants look like. For restricted grants, these now, everything is restricted. If you have now submitted this grant of how you're going to apply your solution in the market, and you've come up with all these different budget lines, these are usually restricted. So that means, using the example before, if you under budgeted on facilitation, but you over budgeted on salaries, they will say, no, that cannot be moved. So you will have to really try to implement within what you set out for. So you have to be cognizant when you're applying for this type of grant. So also another reason why restricted grants are coming up is because implementing partners have not been really transparent in how they've been trying to utilize these grants. So you'll find, let me say, an organization says that they will have this budget on salaries and how they'll pay the different staff these amounts of money, and then you'll realize that this organization does not actually onboard these people and will run the project unstaffed because they're trying to save on that to transfer it to another area. So that's how those checks have tried to come into place, just because that transparency component has been lacking. And then the final one is reimbursable grants. So reimbursable grants, what they look like is you have a contract with them, but they will first let you spend money as an organization, and then you record the transactions of where your money has been spent for these different activities, which you now submit to them, and then they give you a reimbursement on the money that you have spent. So this is also another check for just the transparency component, because now donor agencies are wanting to first see someone actually running a project, because I think before they've been providing funds, and then when it reaches reporting, it has been a challenge because someone has not utilized the funds or they've diverted it to somewhere else. So you realize when you are at reimbursable grants, you've already submitted all the reports to them, and that gives them a picture of whether they are confident that you utilize this money, if their accountabilities meet what you set out to do, and then they'll provide back the money that you have spent. So this is something that bigger organizations are able to do because they have maybe resources from the previous financial year periods, or they have resources that have accumulated over time. As an early stage NGO, it's really hard to try and implement a reimbursable grant if you're using your personal finances. It becomes a bit challenging. So as you go out there to apply for these different opportunities, you have to know what the different types look like and which one fits your organization. So next step, we'll go into grant monitoring. And here we're just trying to measure or review the performance during the grant period. And here we're trying to assess both physical and financial progress, identify risks and corresponding risk mitigation strategies. So the important tools that one can use, you need to first have a complete understanding of the terms and conditions of the grant contract before you sign it. Don't be the person who signs something and then that you're not sure you're competent to do, and then as you are implementing, you start coming up with all these excuses of implementation. There's complete understanding of budget by both finance and program teams. So they should really understand how the money is going to be spent, and they should really, at the inception phase, get to know how the different pricings are going to look like. You would rather overshoot a projection than you undershoot it. Then there's periodic budget variance. So here we're just trying to understand what's the variance in the budget and what's the cause of this. And then there's timely reporting, narrative, and financial reports. So a narrative report it's always something like it gives like a story, or like a success story of what you have implemented. So this is always talks about things of like the challenges you met during implementation, what were the positives during this implementation, what areas do you see that maybe the donor can help you support good, tap into going forward. So it's just a narrative report. A financial report will just be now looking at the figures of your organization. So also here we came up with some tips to ensure successful and effective grant management. So here we're trying to build mutual trust. We're trying to meet project targets without or underspending or overspending on the budget. We're trying to spend capital expenditure budget early. So here it just looks at if you're trying to look at get an asset, should be doing this early enough. And also if you're spending the different items, just try to do everything timely within the project timelines that they've given you. Also, as you're submitting the donor reports, those should be timely and accurate. Don't be doctoring receipts or invoices of things that you did not implement just to give confidence to a donor. You have to try to have timely communication with donors as you're going forward with the overall implementation. So after we have gone through that whole process, you're trying to monitor the grants. Of course, you come to the closure of a grant, and that's when you have effectively implemented. And what does this look like? So this is an integral part. of the whole grant management practice, and the following processes should be ensured. So you have to ensure all provisions for closure grant are complied with. So they will always ask you for maybe a project closure report. There would be need of, let me say, a project closure session, just to go over what was successful, what went well, what didn't go well. So you have to always adhere to that. There should be program and financial reports submitted early and duly acknowledged by the donor. So when you submit these reports, you also have to follow up just to have that accountability and transparency. And then closure report in prescribed format and grant refund based in the grant reconciliation. So in case maybe you have a term that maybe money that you have not utilized is refundable, then you should ensure that money is actually available for them to refund it, or you can ask them to try and implement that money to another activity. That also takes some time because you have to sit over that. All other reporting requirements should be adhered to before formally closing the grant, and then acknowledgement from the funder of not dues after submission of the financial report. So this just ensures that as you're closing out, you are on a clean slate with the donor. They're happy with the work that you've done and the transparency that you've exhibited through this whole process. So that brings an end to our discussion. So here we will just look at what best practices would you implement based off your understanding on grant management principles. So I'll hand this over to Jennifer and Valeria. I don't know if we have much time left for this, so you can just probably advise on this.
Thank you, Colin. Yes, we have time for this activity. So I think if what you can do is you can welcome the participants to share what they have as feedback. So I think it will take some time to chat, to share on the chat because they have to type. Another aspect is if you want to also give your opinion, you can raise your hand and then we can give you the opportunity to also speak. So Colin, we have Ian who has raised his hand. Ian, you can go ahead. You can share, and then Colin will be able to advise or share his opinion as well.
Thank you for the opportunity. This is Okumu Ian. My concern is about grants provided to school-based programs. If I may just ask, from whatever has been shared, how should an organization that is based in school environment persuade or get donor support from whatever programs they have, since school maybe might not be that, the deliverables are not that physical, but with time, they may be of impact. So my question is, how can an organization that is school-based get donor support in terms of grants and other ways of getting income?
Yeah, I think what I'll answer to that is you just have to look for those, just have to try and source those donor agencies that are able to support your mission. I believe they are there because I've seen a number of schools getting supported in that. So it's just trying to look for those agencies to try and support in your mission. There could be those who could maybe tell you to maybe identify a number of schools, a number of students that you can support, and they will pay for them. So yeah, it all depends on what those donors are really looking at. But yeah, it's always, for the ones I've seen, it's always, they will always support, let me say, kids, try to pay for them. And then maybe that can give revenue to a school-based organization to now be in position to use those revenues to try and scale up its operations. Because as you get more students, that means your revenues go up, and then you just try to scale it up that way. So I think, yeah, you just need to try and identify those in your region.
Thank you, Colin, for that answer. We have two questions in the chat. One from, sorry, we're still into, I don't know if anybody, if the participants wants to comment on this discussion point. Otherwise, we can go into the Q&A because I see there are other questions popping up. Colin, are you okay if we take questions? I don't see any comments on this.
All right.
Did Ian raise his hand again? Sorry, I didn't see. Ian, is it from before?
Okay, any comment that I can provide is with such conversation and platforms, I do believe we can make progress. And my concern will be asking the champions who brought out this program or this platform to, and I will just encourage such discussion to be held on a yearly basis if it's possible, so that most of the organizations can now come up, discuss on issues that can bring impact. So I'm so much happy with this, and I will wish that with time, we provide more and more insight in matters of capacity building initiatives. So this is good. I really like it.
Thank you, Ian.
Colin, we have Wamboi. So Wamboi, I want to give you an opportunity since I see your hand is raised. Go ahead before we give it to Valeria to share what is being asked in the chat.
Thank you, Corinne, for the presentation. What you have presented and what we've been discussing all through is grants applied in a normal situation. What I mean in a normal situation, I've managed grants in Somali, and especially when the country was really burning, because the project I was managing culminated to the drafting of the provisional constitution, which gave them a relatively stable government. And I'm looking, as I was following, I was relating to our circumstances. One, by the time these projects were going on, because one was the constitution making support project for Somali, which was never done in Somali. Actually, most of it was done here. It was partially done in Somali because of the situation. And you know, this is what you have presented to us is very conventional. What the project I was implementing was so unconventional. Why am I talking about this? One of them was implemented by the UNDP support making project for Somali. And what they had to do is what you're saying, you go first, do work, and then they'll come and pay you. And then, which was really quite difficult. And I remember when we were applying for these grants, many organizations applied for them, but very few implemented. Why? Because why actually the organization I was working with sailed through is because we were a research institution, and our input was researching on 7 topics that were very pertinent to the constitution making of Somali. Because when these grants, when you're told go and work, and then you're paid. You can imagine, well, most of the organizations were operating from Kenya. Even airlifting personnel from Kenya to Somalia, you need money. The issue of armored vehicles and all that, it's very expensive. And then also, apart from that project, we also had another project which was supported by the European Union. But as I'm saying, nobody could give money to Somalia. I mean, it's a country that was not stable. There are no structures. There is nobody who you'll go and ask for this money. Even us who are implementing, sometimes you look at the project and it's so promising, only to be halfway and something comes and all the structures, and I'll just blown away by war. So we had the European Union, we were given funds, or 75% of the funds came from the European Union, but it was through Heinrich Böll Foundation, the implementing partner. And the European Union was, okay, this kind of funding, the understanding was that European Union will give 75% of the funds. Then Heinrich Böll, which was already working in Somalia and had links, would give 25 as a commitment that, I mean, if our funds sink, it's not all our, not 100% funds from the European Union will sink in Somalia. So I think it's, I don't know whether you have the capacity also to touch on these abnormal circumstances, because they are there even when we are implementing these projects. Even a case of the project of 2019, when COVID hit and, you know, most of the projects went haywire, they could not be implemented as planned. Thank you.
Colin, you can respond to Wamboi, and then Valeria will pick 2 questions in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Wambui, for that submission. So I'm actually happy that, yeah, we have someone who has tried to implement the reimbursable grants, and yeah, they're always tough to try and administer, and that's mainly because it also depends on the organization, the stage that it's at. And I think, as I had mentioned earlier, that's why probably you should be cognizant of maybe the types of grants that are there. So I don't think we have that much time to try and expound on how to look at how to implement reimbursable grants, but it's always going to be a challenge. And I think as you just take up this, you'll just be willing to unlearn and relearn how to implement it, because you have been in a similar situation, but it's always just about understanding whether your donor is actually going to be able to meet these costs, and also what does that mean to you as an organization? Is it something that you can go through with? So if it's something that's not as easy as to do, then it's probably you're better off leaving it compared to trying to implement it and halfway there, because I realize a number of these donors will not even be able to make, because at times you can even be in position to have all these conversations on when the payment should be coming in, but those also really experience delays. So those are things that one should have at the back of the mind, and yeah, it's not really something that's easy to do. That's why most people are trying to stick to the first 2, maybe restricted and unrestricted grants. So I think that's what I can share on that. I don't think we have much time to go through it, but maybe it should be a note to Valeria and the KCDF team, maybe if it's something that we could look into delving into in another session. So I'll just hand it over to Valeria for last comments.
Maybe I can chime in, Collins. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. One is that I would really respond to the lady. She's called who again?
Wambui.
Wambui. Yeah, I know donors come with different conditionalities. So it is you as an organization to see if you can meet those conditionalities. Because sometimes, like what you're saying, what's happening in Somali, donors will come, will look at the risk and, implement the program having the risk at the back of their minds so that they also don't really burn their fingers. That is why they bring in some of those conditionalities. And where you are on a reimbursement contract, where you kind of implement and then you are reimbursed, while there are those ones who give you a down payment, you spend, and then you are reimbursed based on what you've spent. So it purely depends on your contract and the donor conditionalities. The gentleman talked about having these trainings yearly. That's a good suggestion we've had. But even as we do that, we will be encouraging CSOs to, sign into our learning portal, which will have most of this session, most of these modules, so that people can refresh and can have continuous training and engagement with these materials as you implement and you strengthen your systems as a CSO. I thought I would add that so that to add to what our facilitator said. Back to you.
Thank you, Kennedy, for your submission and the depth on that.
Welcome.
So I think can go into the next session. And yeah, this is the final session for today.
Allow
Yes.
me to interrupt. We had some few questions in the chat. Let's just pick one because of time, and then you can answer it. Then we can proceed if it's okay with you.
Oh, I thought our time was fast spent, but yeah, we can have one more.
Yeah, we have at least 2 minutes for one more.
Okay.
Okay, Valeria, you can just go ahead.
Yes. So we have Ronald that is asking, does the amount of a grant is a consideration when choosing the type of grants you're applying for, like unrestricted, restricted, and reimbursement?
No, the amount doesn't vary. In terms of restricted, unrestricted, and reimbursable, it always comes from the conditionalities of probably the donor. There are donors that are okay with the unrestricted grants. There are those who only want people to implement it in a restricted way, and there are those that also would want the reimbursable grants, and that's also based off the money that they provide. So there's no limit to that. This really just comes as a conditionality from the donor. So the donor will maybe say, I have 50,000, it's going to be restricted, or it's going to be unrestricted, or it will be reimbursable. So I don't think the amounts vary.
Thank you, Colin. I think the other two questions from the chat, we will leave them for the final Q&A, so you can proceed.
Okay. So we're into our final topic, which is basically compliance and risk management. So what should compliance look like? So basically, as I shared when we were starting up the session about the topic that we are going to undergo, compliance, we're just trying to look at, as you are starting your organization, what are the different metrics that you have to look forward at attaining as you go forward, as you build up your organization, and what are these things that you have to comply to based off the country that you are operating in. So an NGO, in addition to abiding by local laws and the Constitution or articles of association, must also comply with the terms and conditions of donors who want to ensure that award funds are also spent wisely. So in addition to the registration laws that are in place, different data protection laws that are in place, as you also now start working with different partners, you also have to look at what are their terms and conditions of them providing the support to your organization, and how can you try to ensure that there's overall compliance with this. So this is because why we try to stress the point of compliance is because if you're not abiding to this, then it's going to be really hard for you to scale up your organization. You sometimes find people not registering their organizations because they fear maybe certain legal implications based off what they are doing. And I don't think that's something that we should be wary of, but we should rather look at having an organization whereby everything that we do is transparent, and we're not trying to really have risks anytime coming into our operations. So the second point looks at NGOs face internal and external risks, which can threaten the operations and even survival. So for example, funds being withdrawn, an office fire, or a fraud. So here we're just trying to look into risk assessment and mitigations. So risks must be identified and actively managed to limit the damage they can cause. So usually as an organization, as you are really trying to look at the operations and coming up with the activity plan you're going to do, you have to also try and do a risk assessment. So for example, in the area that you are at, it's accessible to fire. If it is, then how are you really trying to transfer that risk? Are you going to maybe try to insure the building? What are you going to try and do? Also, as you're doing your day-to-day operations, you have to understand what risks are there that you face that could also even affect the funding that you have gotten being withdrawn from you. And the final one is compliance in Kenya. Entails confirmed various legal, regulatory, and operational requirements established by the government and appropriate agencies. So yeah, that's basically it. And we'll look into what the different key elements of the legal obligations in the Kenyan space look like. So for NGOs especially, so the first should be registration. As an NGO, you must try to register with the NGO Coordination Board and provide documentation such as the constitution, details of their governing body, and information about their intended activities. So yeah, you should just try to ensure that you register your NGO at the inception. Usually registration doesn't cost much, so it's always a first step that you can start with. Don't wait for the point of when you're talking to donors, they're asking, are you registered? And then you don't have this. There should be compliance with the NGO Coordination Act. So after you've been in position to register, they will give you that NGO Coordination Act, and you should try to read that in depth to understand areas that you should be in position to meet. So in terms of the annual reports and the different financial accounts. So of course, under this, this pretty much came up in also the Ugandan space, where it has even become really challenging for someone to actually open up an NGO, because a number of organizations have been opening up NGOs for all sorts of different purposes that are not really trying to create that impact in the different communities that they are trying to support. So it has really become hard, and that's how also these acts also keep coming up and keep being updated, just to try and counter those different loopholes. There should be financial reporting, so you should comply to financial reporting. This is something already went through in detail, so just trying to ensure that your financial reports are up to speed. I shared that even when you're at the first step of using your personal finances, you always have to just start this habit early. So as by the time you now start handling bigger funding opportunities, it's something that already instilled as the principles of your organization. And then there may be sector-specific requirements. So a number of NGOs, based off the sectors that they are in, health, education, and environment, there are licenses that they should be in position to try and get. So you have to try to ensure that you know the sector that you are in, or seek advice from someone in that sector just to try and show you that, just to try and support on that. So yeah, you have to be cognizant of the sector that you are in and how that can be done. Then employment laws, it is crucial for NGOs to abide by labor regulations or employment contracts, working conditions, and employee rights. So as an NGO, of course, you're going to be in a position where you're hiring people. And I like that just before this session, you are able to go through a number of you probably must have attended the HR, the human resource training that took place. And I'm sure they try to dive deep into how your employee should be managed to ensure that you adhere to the different employee contracts. So in case of things like termination of an employee, just to ensure that these different employees, you're treating them right, and also they adhere to what your organization stands out to do, because this is also usually a risk to many organizations, because at times they are not cognizant about the different employment laws and how to go through matters relating to employees, because you're working with people, and yeah, it's going to be quite a challenge in many disciplines. So you just need to know how to ensure that you treat them in the way that the law requires. The final one is Data Protection Act. And basically, this looks at you as an NGO, you're going to really try to, the number of individuals you're going to be working with or collaborating with. These could be your target groups that you are supporting, and you're going to find yourself handling a lot of personal data of these beneficiaries, also data of the donors. You'll find that maybe you're having access to their national identification documents, different data on maybe what their earnings look like, and you should be in position to ensure that there's confidentiality in you managing this data. A participant or beneficiary should not give you data today, and then they find it maybe in a newspaper after 3 days, because that now will affect really what your NGO is trying to achieve. So we really have to ensure that even as we collect this data, we try to ensure that these beneficiaries are actually, they sign consent for you to pick this data. Don't be someone who goes to shoot a success story of, let me say, a beneficiary, and a beneficiary that whose consent you did not get appears in the video, and then maybe they try to proceed with legal matters. So we just have to be cognizant of that, because that could really affect the reputation of our organizations. So those are the key legal obligations of NGOs, especially in the Kenyan space. And we'll now just go into what risk assessment is, and what mitigation is, and what the process looks like. So risk assessment, here we're just trying to identify and have an analysis of the risks that are happening in our organizations on a day-to-day basis. So every day, as you're having these activities done, and as you're going to the different beneficiaries, a number of you could be implementing projects in places that have a lot of insecurity. So those are things that you should try to look out for. Here in the Ugandan space, I know people who are implementing projects in the Karamoja area, Moroto, which has, for example, high insecurity. So of course, as you're sending your employees there, you should know the risks that lay on them going to those areas, and how you're going to try to address those. So that's how the mitigation component comes into. So you try to identify the risk first, and then come up with a mitigation component. So here we came up with a process of how that whole risk assessment and looks like. So you start by identifying the risks. So if your employees are routinely going to places with high insecurity, that's already a risk that you've tried to note out. And then you try to analyze this risk and prioritize it. So you have come up with the different risks as an organization. There could be that of insecurity. There could be a risk of, let me say, so many different risks coming up. And based off that, you have to now try and prioritize which ones are high priority, which ones are medium priority. And you try to see, based off the funds that you have, how do we try to also address these risks? If I've gotten an asset and this asset is always transporting the staff to different areas, there's a risk of, let me say, an accident. How do I prioritize that? So after you've analyzed the risk, group them into priority and into high priority and low priority, you now develop mitigation strategies. And these mitigation strategies are now just to try to combat the risk that you have come up with as an organization. So you come up with these mitigation strategies, and then you try to implement this based off their priority. And of course, after a period of time, you have to also monitor how these mitigations are trying to develop their support in mitigating the risks that you have come up with. So you monitor and review, you say, maybe we came up with this mitigation strategy, but it's not quite effective for this risk that we have identified. So always be a process of learning and unlearning the different risks that you have identified and also the strategies that you have come up to. At times, you could realize that maybe you've come up with a strategy, but it's too expensive for you to implement. So you try to see what other feasible option can you try to target. So yeah, that's what risk assessment looks like, and also what the compliance component looks like. So we'll just have questions here, a few questions that we can go into, and then I'll hand it over to
maybe Collins, before you get into questions, just to chip in.
Did I go back to the previous slide?
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Should I go back to the previous slide?
Yeah, go back to the previous slide. No, the other one, the table. Great, there. Yeah, I just wanted to add that as Collins has said, our facilitator, in Kenya, there's been a change in the management of the NGO. We had a new act coming in place in last year, May 2024, called the Public Benefit Organization Act, the PBO Act, which took over from the NGO Council, NGO Board work. And that was effective May last year. So effectively, all the NGOs are supposed to have transitioned to be PBOs by within the year from 14th of May 2024. So what has happened is that we have the board, the NGO board that used to do compliance work has been transitioned to what we call the Public Benefit Organization Regulatory Authority. And it works on issues about compliance, about registration and all that. And then we have the National Federation for PBOs, which does the laws, you know. So for Kenya, we'll no longer have the NGO board. We now have the PBO, the Public Benefit Organization. So it is just important for people to know. And also CBOs are allowed to register as PBOs. And also, we also have other registration mechanism like the Community-Based Organization Act. So the CBOs, the CBOs need to check this and see where they fall and register appropriately. Because of this transition, there's a lot of work that is going on to come up with regulation, guidelines, and all that, so that all NGOs are transitioned to be PBOs. So I thought this was important because this has since changed in Kenya from NGOs to PBOs. I don't know if somebody has a question. Yes, George. Sorry, Jennifer, they can see our hands up.
Yes, I see George hand is raised. George, do you want to ask a question about the PBO? Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kennedy, for bringing up that. I think it was also mentioned in the HR. My question is, those organizations that are registered as trusts, for example, or foundations, must they also now go to the PBO? Is it mandatory? What is the risk of one not moving there? What is the advantage of going to the PBO Act, for example?
It is not mandatory. You can still remain as a trust because you are registered in a different regime. Eh? You are registered under the Companies Act.
Yeah.
So it is not mandatory to move unless your organization now feels that you look at the benefits that comes with the PBO and you want to move there, but it is not mandatory. The mandatory organizations are NGOs.
Thank you so much.
They automatically transition to PBOs.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, welcome. Back to Jennifer and Collins.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kennedy, for that. I think there's a question also on the same on the PBO. Could I request you to please answer it on the chat? Tell us a question on the chat, if it's okay with you, Kennedy. Kennedy, if you're speaking, you're on mute. And then Colin, you can move to the Q&A, and then Valeria can let us know the questions that we have.
Okay, I'll answer it on the chat. Just let's move on.
Okay, thank you so much, Kennedy. So I think I welcome Valeria for questions, as also welcome the rest of the participants. Is there any questions on the chat for us to be able to handle in the next, we have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Jennifer. There were 2 questions from the previous session. One is from Rosalind. Colin, she is asking, when working on a budget of, let's say, 1 million, how much buffer should you have as an organization to set aside for the particular project if your grant application is successful?
Valeria, could you just share again?
Yes. When working on a budget of, for example, 1 million, how much buffer should you have as an organization to set aside for that particular project if your grant application is successful? If you require clarification, we can also ask Rosalind to rephrase.
I've gotten it. I don't think you should have any buffer because as I'd shared, usually as you're doing a budget, you're planning for what you have versus what you're going to spend. So if you're now going to budget for 1 million, but you're not sure how much is going to come, you're not sure of the success of the grant that you've applied for, then it's going to be a challenge when it comes to implementation and also in terms of the variation. So usually, as a principle in financial management, you only budget for what you have or you believe you have access to. So let me say if you have an access to an overdraft facility somewhere, you can budget for that. That maybe that can come into support because it's you have access to it. You may not have the money yet, but you have access to it. But it's always wise to budget for what you already have in the account of the organization. If the grant opportunity comes in, then well and good, then you can just try to rework your budget and see maybe if you can take on more activities based off the income that has come in. So remember, there's always a monitoring and reviewing period of time. So during that period of time, you can try to utilize that if the funding opportunity has come in. Now over to you, Valeria, for the other question.
Thank you, Colin. There's one question from, I don't know how to Wilberforce. Since many organizations are struggling to have and maintain credible resource mobilization and proposal writing teams, what advice do you give to such small organizations?
Pardon?
Let me repeat. Since many organizations are struggling to have and maintain credible resource mobilizations and proposal writing teams, what advice do you give to such small organizations?
I believe as all organizations usually start up, I don't think they start up with proposal writing teams. So it's always a skill that one has to just try to develop as they start the organization. Because currently also, for example, I'll use myself as an example. I do write proposals, but for organizations, and at first it was something that I didn't know how to do it, but it's always a process of learning. So you first start with the first one, and then as you do more research on what's required, you're able to know the different intricacies that go into what a proposal should look like. So it's just something that will take some time and should just be open to the process of learning. So you submit some, and also you realize that, yeah, you submit a number, maybe they may not be successful in the early stages, but you just have to be resilient and continuously try to write those proposals until the point where you can actually have a proposal team. You will realize that there have been a number of organizations where it's always the co-founders doing this, and they do not even have proposal reporting teams or something to that. And that's because it's a skill that one can actually develop. Just will take some time. But yeah, that's just basically it. Just have to be willing to walk that journey. It's just my closing remarks, and I just want to thank everyone that has been able to attend these 3 sessions that we have run. It has been really insightful, and yeah, hope that you're able to start putting some of these practices into your organizations, and hoping for the best for all those that have spent their time attending these sessions. So I'll just give you one word of encouragement. Just try to slowly start progressing these into your organizations, and you realize a number of changes to how your operations are going. So yeah, just good luck in everything that you're going to do as an organization over the next years. And also special thanks go out to the LightUp Impact team and KCDF. Thank you for having these trainings for these NGOs and different organizations. I believe they're really insightful in what you are trying to achieve. And from what I've seen over these sessions, I believe there's impact that has been created in these organizations. So thank you for actually spending the resources to this, trying to tailor the manuals, having these interactive sessions with the different NGOs, and also the more things that you've shared that you're going to do for them. So yeah, thank you for that. And also, yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And it's been a good 3 sessions, interacting with different participants. It has been really insightful on my end as well, and a lot of learnings, and hope a number of them have been able to gain some insights in the financial management space. I think I'll end it at that, and we'll hand it over to Jennifer. Thank you.
We'll be having a 3rd session, a 3rd module. We'll be covering a 3rd module in the next 2 weeks or so. In fact, in the next 3 weeks, we'll be having our governance module. And the governance module, we hope, and that will not change this date, will be on 25th and 28th. And no, 24th and 28th of February. so that we also kind of take people, what are some of the governance practices that keep our organization above board and also makes our organizations being well managed. I would also want to urge all participants to log into the KCDF Financial Resilient Hub portal, where we'll be having all the sessions that we've covered, so that we have an e-learning that will be rolling out with all the 9 sessions plus another 3, rather 9 modules plus another 3 modules covering issues around organizational capacity development, but also looking at issues of social enterprise and financial resilience. So still looking forward to be interacting with you in the near future when we roll out the other sessions, but feel free to log into KCDF Financial Resilient Hub or website so that you learn more about KCDF. Log into the LightUp Impact website so that you see how do you benefit from the resources that are with LightUp, how do you benefit from resources that are with Femi Foundation, so that we kind of improve the health of our organizations as we manage the resources that we have on behalf of our communities. Otherwise, asanteni sana, and looking forward to, looking forward to another interaction in the near future. Thank you so much.